Welcome to More Than a Few Words, a marketing conversation. This is your host, Lorraine Ball. And I know if you're working in marketing, if you're running a business, you really want a crystal ball. You want to have that magic information that just tells you how your business is doing. Well, I got news for you. There is a crystal ball, and it's in your analytics. And to have a conversation about analytics, I've invited Philippa Games to join me. Philippa has clocked over 25 years in digital marketing strategy and analytics, consulted with nearly 500 clients, and worked with websites that have cumulatively generated hundreds of millions of dollars. If you're interested in finding out how you get a piece of that pie, you want to listen to the rest of this conversation. Philippa, welcome to the show.
Hi, Laura, thank you. That was a great introduction. Appreciate it.
You know, I have always been a geek. I've always been about the numbers. And so I probably, as a business owner, erred on the wrong side where I had my head down too much. But for most business owners, they're not looking at the analytics. Why should they?
Well, and I think I understand why they don't, and I don't blame them. When you look at something like Google Analytics, which is what I mainly work in, it's overwhelming. I mean, there's tons and tons of charts and numbers and reports, and what does it all mean, and how on earth do you get started? The problem is that if you're not looking at those analytics in a way that makes sense for your business, then honestly, I think you're flying blind with your whole investment in your website. And for most businesses now, a website plays a role in the business, right? It's important.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you that it is so central. But what should I be looking at? Because there's a lot there.
Right. And so the point is to look at things that you need to know. So one of the things that I do with clients is before I even look at the analytics, we look at the business and the strategy and what is it you're trying to do with your website? Because every website is actually doing some different things. But what you need to do is to be really aware of what are the outcomes that you're looking for. Every page on your site should have a call to action, at least one that directs people to what you want them to do as a result of seeing that page. Because if you don't do that, then the very good chance is that they won't do whatever it was that you wanted them to do. So having that understanding of where you're trying to go with your site gives you the questions then that you can then ask, because then what you want to know is how many people are doing this thing that I want them to do.
You made a really critical point that every page on your website has to have that call to action, that next step, because people don't know what to do if you don't share that.
Right. And some of them will try to figure it out. A lot of them won't. And so, well, here's a really good practical example, therefore, of why analytics are important. So I'm seeing increasingly long pages on websites, and that's because of mobile, and I understand that, right? The problem is that people don't always scroll. In fact, often they don't scroll. And so if your important call to action is way down at the bottom of a really long piece of content, then a good proportion of visitors are never even going to see it. And that's key information. And that's why analytics are important, because just looking at the page, you would have no idea whether or not people were getting that far down the page.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that we did because I used to build a lot of web pages, when the pages started getting longer and longer and longer, we built a short page with a call to action and then took the rest of the content and put it underneath that and then repeated the call to action.
Right.
So for the lazy scroller, but if we hadn't been looking at the analytics, it would never have occurred to us that we were missing those opportunities.
Right, exactly that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with putting several different calls to action in your pages. Apart from anything else, one of the things you can do then is test like what kind of a call to action works best, what wording works best, or is it a button, or is it a picture, or so there's lots of things that you can do once you start to get that data that shows you what's going on.
Okay, so one of the things you mentioned there is looking at the bounce rate, looking at people, how long are they spending on a particular page. What if I'm just starting out and I really don't know what my website can do for me. What are the first things I should be looking at?
Well, I would say that you should have figured that out when you designed your site, but we won't go there.
Yeah. We know that's good, but we also know that a lot of people just throw up a website and now they've got it and now they want to know what's next.
But as I said, really, the thing is to really understand what your site's about. So number one, you've probably got some content. So
Mm-hmm.
for example, if you had podcasts, like you have podcast episodes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or videos, one of the things that you can do with analytics is figure out whether or not people watch the whole thing. So a lot of default analytics will tell you how many people click the start button. Not that many. You have to customize, or you have to go deeper to figure out how many people finish. And I loved your introduction because you actually told people this is why you need to watch the whole thing, because you're going to get this right. If you don't do that and you just have a really boring blah blah intro, a lot of people will get turned off and leave immediately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's something that as the podcast host, you want to know, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I see a lot of business videos where the business has spent time and energy trying to make a really interesting video, but it isn't, because it doesn't have that compelling beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't watch the whole thing.
No.
So,
Now, and I was going to say, and as you're putting videos now up on YouTube, if you don't have good graphics, if like I used to just share what we're looking at right now. Well, what I've learned is if I don't put like a compelling graphic up front that tells people what you're going to get, they slide right by. And I'm like, but this was really good.
right, right, right.
Okay, so what else should I be looking at in my analytics? What else should I be asking about my website?
So, and you can go a little bit further. So we've talked about, are people fulfilling your calls to action? Are they engaging with your content?
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say that you do have a site that has, maybe it's an e-commerce site, you're selling stuff, or you have a lot of thought, leadership content, whatever. If you have a search engine actually on your site, which if you have a lot of stuff is really helpful to help people get around, that search engine is a fantastic market research source, because you can look at what people put into that search engine and it tells you all sorts of things. Firstly, it tells you how people describe, what words they use for what you offer, because that's really important. Because, if your industry is full of jargon, right,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
understand your jargon. The question is, do your customers or your prospects? Because if they don't, you want to make content that they are going to understand, and then you can teach them your jargon, right? Then you can
Mm-hmm.
educate them. So what words do they use? Another thing it tells you is, what do they expect from you? And I have got stories. I mentioned my book will, hopefully by the time this goes out, my book will be out. My book's called Website Wealth. With my clients, we've actually found opportunities for new products or services based on what people put into that internal search engine, because they're talking about what they think you could provide. And if it turns out to be something that you could provide, but you don't currently, right there is a great idea, right?
Wow. I would sometimes look at the questions, the most popular questions on Google and go, well, we should be talking about this because it's in our industry and it's related. But I never thought about going that next step and specifically looking at kind of service related questions. What kind of products are people asking for? What do they think when they search this that they're going to find? That's brilliant.
Well, and it can be content, because I've also worked with content sites where people put questions in, as you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've created information products,
Mm-hmm.
like stuff that you can sell for a few bucks, but it's
Mm-hmm.
it's an ebook or a PDF, which is basically a PDF, right?
Mm-hmm.
That actually sell quite well and make some decent money.
Once you understand what people are looking for. Well, Philippa, this has been fabulous. I'm going to encourage everybody, guys, if you want to know more about what's hiding in your analytics, you want to go to websitesthatwin.com/ebook. And there's a free ebook there. There's 5 hidden digital analytic gems that you definitely want to look into. And you also want to look for Philippa's new book. Will it be on Amazon?
Oh, yes.
All right. Well, then we will have links And you definitely want to check that out as well. Philippa, thanks again for being a part of the show.
Thank you. That was great.
If you've enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to find other resources for your business, head over to morethanafewwords.com. There you'll find hundreds of conversations like this, workbooks, white papers, and webinars. This has been another episode of More Than a Few Words. Thanks for listening.